Hello ghouls and gals. I'm not sure I'm looking forward to the comments on this one. Before I even start, let's remember to keep it civil, guys. If I wanted to avoid the bonfire, I could have just dodged this topic. But I am a small YouTuber who knows that people love a good list, and so I must do what I can to appease the algorithm gods. So, today we're counting down my top 5 Warhammer Fantasy duelists. I'm going by my opinion on who I think the best duelists in the world of Warhammer Fantasy are. A reminder again, this is my opinion, and while I do believe a lot of these guys can kick some major behind, you are more than welcome to disagree with your own list, tell me to jump off a bridge, or do whatever you want. I don't mind, and I can't stop you. We do have a small set of rules to go over before we begin. First, I'm only going over characters that are alive right before the end times, basically in 8th edition. This stops an Aryan just sitting atop the list in the biggest anti-climax since I was with my ex-wife. Also, we're not going to be including gods, as again it would just swing the list towards them. We'd be able to get about 2 normal entries before slapping Sigmar and Grimnir in the top spots. Finally, we're going to be focusing on melee fighters only here. Magic items are allowed, but they can't be casters primarily. We can do another video on spellcasters if you like, but only if you eat your veggies. Oh, and just one more thing before we get into the muck of the top 5, honourable mentions. There were a lot of people I had to cut from this list, and it was honestly tougher than I thought it would be by a mile, as Games Workshop can't help but give every character who wields a sword some sort of insane feat to make them feel like a major player in the world. Even so, this is a top 5 list, and so we've had to drop a lot of names. Honestly, I could have made a top 10, or even a top 20 if I'd wanted to, but then the video would have been like an hour, and you guys barely listened to me for more than a couple of minutes. I've seen the analytics, I know. Our honourable mentions are, in no particular order, Settra the Imperishable, Wulfric the Wanderer, Vlad von Karstein, Grombrindal, Giles le Breton, and the saddest one for me, Kroq-Gar. Settra has some major feats, especially in the end times, but I think he was largely given a power boost there to send the Tomb Kings on their way, rather than to make him a major player in terms of duelists. Wulfric the Wanderer is strong and a duelist primarily, and he can trick you into making a mistake when fighting him, but could he honestly beat more than half the people, even on the honourable mentions? I'm not sure. Vlad is an absolute beast, but again I think he can be outmatched by some of the people on the list. Grombrindal almost earned a spot here, but as we'll see, he was edged out by another of his kin, if only just. Giles, aka the Green Knight, is technically dead in my book, so I'm not including him here, even if he appears as his spectral self and has this return in the end times, yada yada yada. I think he falls more under a ghost of the Green Knight than Giles le Breton. Finally, Kroq-Gar was the hardest lad to drop, as he is the oldest living mortal warrior around, having slain millions of the Lizardmen's enemies by this point. To be honest, I think he is a solid replacement for number 5, so if you don't like who I've gone with there, imagine I just said Kroq-Gar. Speaking of number 5, the 5th best duelist in Warhammer Fantasy, in my humble opinion, is Tyrion. In fairness, I did just say we could really trade Tyrion and Kroq-Gar's positions on this list, because you could make a good case for either coming out on top if they fought each other. But if we remove Grimlock from the equation and have this battle on foot, to me Tyrion comes out on top, if only just. Tyrion is an impeccable swordsman, and he is rightly feared throughout the ranks of the enemies of the High Elves. The same could be said for Kroq-Gar, but I think that the old lizard might not have it in him to take down the younger, more tactile Tyrion. Of course, this list is not just about a potential fight between these two, but also when we look at the larger scale of the world, I think Tyrion is capable of just pulling ahead. He's one of Warhammer Fantasy's best and brightest, the shining example of a melee fighter in the same sense that his brother sets the bar for a High Elven mage. Tyrion beat 4 Elven assassins while poisoned by a Witch Elf's blade. He beat Unkari, and if you're counting end time stuff, he battered Malekith on more than one occasion. He's an unstoppable force, really, but there are at least 4 more characters that can prove mightier than even him. Number 4 on our list is Gotrek Gurnason. I know what you're thinking. Gotrek? Number 4? Time to destroy this little man and his tiny channel. Well, remember I said this was an opinionated list, and it's also an incredibly competitive one. Gotrek is perhaps the worst slayer of all time, as a slayer's goal is to go and get killed in the heat of battle. However, as he has not died, even when the old world died, he's racked up an incredible kill count. Few characters in Warhammer have as much time dedicated to showing off their deeds as Gotrek does, and those deeds are numerous. He has killed hordes of orcs, Skaven and other enemies of the Dowie in their thousands, never being brought low by monsters, trolls and enemy champions. In terms of his greatest deeds, he did take down a Black Ark, and while this was with an artifact rather than his own prowess, he did kill hundreds of Dark Elves on the way to bringing the thing down. He, like Tyrion, has also killed a greater demon, bringing low a bloodthirster of Khorne. Gotrek is simply unkillable by how the lore treats him, always managing to overcome any opponent. While his axe can take a lot of the credit for that, it has transformed him into more than just a normal dwarf, and will continuously make his job of getting himself slain that much more difficult. To some of you, he probably sits at number 1 on this list, just because of how many things he's killed, and how he is made out to be one of the strongest fighters in the setting by a mile. He's why I couldn't put Grombrindal on this list, as even though I think the White Dwarf could give a lot of the lads a run for their money in Warhammer, the sheer power of Gotrek and that axe he's thrown around makes him an undeniable addition, even if I think there are a few characters that could beat him up. When we're talking sheer power, raw physical strength, we would be idiots not to mention da biggest and da baddest and da best orc around, Grimgor Ironhide. The winner of the Battle of the Grims vote I've been running on the community page for the past few weeks. Grimgor is a one-orc army. He doesn't have a great amount of wit or magic items that push him past his physical limits. He's just a big, beefy bloke who will run at you and will kill you. Grimgor, up until the end times, had never lost a fight. There was no enemy he would not lop the head off of, from Kislev to the Empire to all the way in the Badlands. He's so good at fighting that most of the time he only leaves a place because he's bored and has killed everyone and everything worth killing. Grimgor is the apex predator of Warhammer Fantasy, as he's not really a clever beast, but one that will remind you very quickly that you're lower on the food chain than him when you enter battle against this massive green monster. He solely faced down the toughest rat ogres in Hell Pit, created by Throt the Unclean himself, did what no army has ever done before, and crossed where the World's Edge Mountains met the Mountains of Morn, where he faced off against thousands of Kurgans, battling their leader Crom for hours until he realised all his troops had died around him. This was technically a defeat of Grimgor's army, but not one of himself, as even completely surrounded, he could not be brought low. If Games Workshop hadn't have been cowards, he would have canonically beaten Archaon in single combat as well, kicking the Everchosen so hard in the nuts they popped. However, they went with a different option, as we know, but that still can't tarnish Grimgor's impeccable melee prowess. Very few have even walked away from a fight with him, and fewer still could have had a chance to best him. I know I said Tyrion is an unstoppable force before, but really that name should go to Grimgor, the force of nature that he is. As I said, Games Workshop didn't go with Grimgor beating Archaon as a canonical end to the apocalypse of Warhammer, and instead they made the Everchosen live up to his name, which is why he earns our number 2 spot. Archaon the Everchosen, Herald of the End Times, is an absolute beast on the battlefield. Of course, a lot of his power scaling comes from his role in destroying the Warhammer setting, but as this is all a work of fiction, Games Workshop can make him as powerful as they please without any say-so from us in the matter. Tomorrow, if Games Workshop wished, Giggles the Gretchen could become the most powerful being in 40k, kill the Chaos Guards and take the throne of the Imperium, and there's nothing any of us could do about it. Anyway, I'm getting away from my point here. Archaon is a mix of both incredible raw strength, power gifted to him by the Chaos Gods, and the items he uses in battle. A former priest of Sigmar, Archaon's fall to Chaos was planned even before his birth, and with it came one of the most powerful fighters in Warhammer Fantasy history. He wields the Slayer of Kings, a huge sword which has the captured soul of a demon inside it, the Eye of Shirian and the Crown of Domination, which give him the powers of prophecy and the ability to turn his opponent's legs to jelly, and the armour of Morkar, the first Everchosen, to deflect even the mightiest of blows. Archaon's kill count is incredibly impressive. To get the Crown of Domination, he fought a bloodthirster and defeated it single-handedly. He killed Grimgor in a single stroke in the end times. To call the Chaos Banners to him, he had to defeat multiple great leaders, including Kolek Suneater, in duels. He is truly a sight to behold on the battlefield, and managed to match Sigmar Reborn as the world fell around him. Even being the absolute terror that Archaon is, though, he's still not our number 1 pick. As I said, Archaon is what he is, half because of his own prowess, but also because of how many knickknacks and other blessings he's got from the Chaos Gods. Our final entry on this list doesn't need any of that, besides the vampiric curse that's kept them alive until the point that makes them eligible for this list. Abarash could simply pick up a blade and wipe the floor with every other fighter on this list, in my humble opinion. Known by many names, Abarash the Great, Abarash the Wanderer, Abarash the Master, the Dragon Slayer, the Scourge of the Greenskins, the Blade Immortal, Abrash was once the guard of Neferata, and even then was known to be the best fighter in all of Nehekhara. At the fall of Lamia, when vampirism reigned, Abrash had to be tricked into becoming a vampire, and tried to hold off from feeding as long as he could. Even when he did give in to the Red Thirst, he only fed from great warriors and fighters, finding it pathetic to feed on the weak. He began the Order of the Blood Knights, which itself contained some of the finest fighters in Warhammer. Eventually, when he fought and single-handedly defeated a red dragon and fed on it, Abrash found he no longer needed to feed on blood. He might not boast the extensive lore or kill count of some of the other entries on this list, but he did fight Giles le Breton to a draw when the first king of Bretonnia lived, and at the end times returned to defend Bretonnia until the world collapsed. It's not known whether he survived or not, but if he did perish, he did so as the greatest fighter the world has ever seen. That's our list. I can already hear the sweet song of you typing out how wrong I am in the comments below, but I would love to hear who you think the best fighter is in Warhammer Fantasy, so please do leave a comment. And if you want to see more stuff like this, you can let me know with a like and subscribe as always. But until next time, I've been your local ghoul, and I'll be seeing you soon.